welcome to another deep dive episode on the Total Space Network. Today we are continuing the Lunar Future series with Szabolcs Jaray. So, without further ado, let's start.
Yeah. So, hi everyone. My name is Szabolcs, and we are continuing the last discussion about the lunar future, and let's talk about that.
Yeah. So, you had some clever landing ideas on the moon.
Yeah. So let's first talk about why it is needed to have some clever idea about landing on the moon. Because as we know that Elon Musk is planning to go to Mars with the starships, and there is a big advantage for Mars and also for Earth having an atmosphere, and that makes the so-called aero capture or aerobraking possible. That means the spacecraft entering the atmosphere can slow down itself with the help of the friction of the atmosphere, and that is unfortunately not available on the moon, and that's why surprisingly going to the moon needs almost as much fuel, almost as much fuel as going to Mars, and that is because you have to slow down your vehicle all the way to the surface of the moon, and you have to consume a lot of fuel for that, because you have to bring down your fuel that is needed for the ascent later, so you can actually go back to Earth with the vehicle. So, and the crew rocket equation says that it needs a lot of fuel, and my idea was, why could we not find out something that is similar to an aerobraking maneuver? So obviously we cannot use atmosphere on the moon.
Yeah, there's like maybe 10 particles within a square meter. So it's not really an atmosphere.
Yeah, where we cannot call that an atmosphere. So not even close. Yeah, as we know, Mars is much better in that sense, with that 1% of atmosphere compared to the Earth. It even can support a helicopter to fly, as we could see, fortunately, recently with the Ingenuity.
Yeah, great looking flight.
Yeah, absolutely. That was great. So on the moon we will not see any Ingenuity helicopters or anything like that to fly for sure. And what do we have on the moon which can be used to slow down a spacecraft? Of course, my first idea was we have the moon surface. So actually, if there are examples on the Earth as well, that an aircraft is landing on ice, for example, and slipping on ice, and the friction on the surface slows it down, and for that the airplane doesn't use any fuel, any force in itself. So why could we not do that on the moon? So that was my first idea. But then I thought about that if you are coming with the orbital velocity at the moon, which is about 1.7 kilometer per second, then perhaps it's not so good idea to try to touch down on the surface and and to sleep on it until the spacecraft stops. So that was my first idea, but that is probably not so good idea. quite dangerous.
Yeah, I think it could be a quite hard landing.
Yeah, but what could be another method to slow down the spacecraft, which is not its engine, which is not its propulsive engine, which is not so good because consumption of so much fuel. So it's about to change the momentum of the spacecraft, and how could we change it from with an outer source. For example, I saw that even though we don't have an atmosphere, we could somehow simulate that we have something similar. So what can be done if we what does the atmosphere do with the spacecraft? It bounces to the spacecraft, and with the help of the friction, with the help of how they interact, the molecules and the spacecraft body, it will give take away some momentum of the spacecraft, so it slows it down. So if we somehow simulate that on the moon, it can be used to slow it down. So what I saw that just install on the lunar surface some kind of cannons, electromagnetic cannons, coil guns, something like that. And with the help of those, we shoot to the spacecraft, which doesn't sound so good, because as we know from different kind of science fiction movies, shooting to a spacecraft is usually doesn't have a good ending. But here we could shoot the spacecraft with very little grains, particles, which has not so much mass, but we can shoot a stream of that to the direction of the spacecraft. And actually, it has to be calculated quite well, because these stream of particles would move on an orbital trajectory, and it should meet the spacecraft just in the opposite direction. And the spacecraft should have some kinds of adjustable big plates which it can interact with. So one particle arrives to this plate and bounces back. So it has to be somehow figured out or technically engineered, designed that way that it should bounce back, because if it does that, it takes the most momentum, which is possible. And for that, we can actually also use the particles being electrically charged, and the plate also charged, so they could act against each other, so make a force that make them yeah, so not just opposite the gravity. And so that is one possible solution, but for that we have to have more guns on the surface, because as the aircraft arrives, it first it have about a parallel velocity to the moon surface, and then as it is slowing down, it will slowly turn to the surface, and at the end it should ideally has a 0 velocity. But for that, first the horizontal velocity vector component should be erased totally or zeroed. So and then the spacecraft could land. And for that, we have to have different on different places these guns which are shooting to that spacecraft. And for the spacecraft to remain on that trajectory without using its own fuel, the plates could be adjustable. So the force which awakens when a particle bounces back from the plate can be adjusted. So the spacecraft would suffer the expected force to slow it down. So that's a bit strange idea, because we haven't yet done anything like that in the space history of humankind. Not that it is so long, and unfortunately we don't really have much experience with landing on different planetary bodies. So of course the Apollo program landed on the moon several times, and we have probes that landed on the Mars. We have also a probe that landed on Venus, a Russian probe actually. And but beside these, do you, Mikko, recall some other landings?
Yes, a couple of asteroids.
Exactly, but that's a totally different story. On an asteroid, the hard task is not to slow down, but the hard task is not to bounce back. Actually, yeah. So that's different.
I mean, the idea could definitely work, but it would require quite a lot of planning, so you can shoot the spacecraft in right angle, and as it moves 1.6, 1.7 kilometers per second, you would have to have quite a lot of guns and particles. But yeah, I guess that would be kind of making an artificial atmosphere for the spacecraft.
Yeah. As I was thinking about this one, I also recall that there was one occasion when at the Enceladus moon, the Enceladus moon has a very special property that it is shooting up water spray, water molecules into the space, and which was the probe that was flying across that very thin.
Was it
water cloud.
Cassini? Maybe
Cassini.
because
I think yes.
I think it's Enceladus. The moon.
Yes, Enceladus.
Yeah.
Yeah. So based on that, and this is a quite a new idea of mine. We can just shoot up a cloud of just the right density gas or molecules or maybe particles that are going up to the level of where our spacecraft is arriving. It is going through the cloud. It is slowing that a bit down, and the cloud falls back to the moon because of we don't have any atmosphere that's a vacuum. So if the vectors are like that, it falls back, and perhaps it can be used later. But that doesn't really sound realistic. But it is. I think it is a very interesting process as we are thinking about this kind of new methods, new spacecrafts, anything new. So we thinking about if we can invent or find out something that can be useful later or can be implemented, built actually. And sometimes we have we have ideas which are really not realistic. Actually, sometimes they are really ridiculous. But even though if some of these ideas are ridiculously nonsense, even though it is worth to think about that, because from that you can have a step toward a better idea and even a next step after that. So
Yeah, I do agree.
So this is yeah, this is an interesting method of finding out something which can be at the end useful and not nonsense.
Yeah.
So for example, yeah, okay.
Yeah, it can be really different, and I don't see anything like this coming within the next 100 years, but maybe a few 100 years.
Well, yes, it is absolutely possible. But I mentioned that thinking about a nonsense idea can lead to a more practical one, because as I was thinking about this one or thinking about how we can land on the moon and sleep on the surface, of course the surface had to be really flat, so it has to be prepared like a landing strip, something like that. But when I thought about that and about this shooting the particles to the spaceship, slowing it down, I realized that if we are not shooting with particles, we don't we don't interact with the spacecraft with actual physical bodies. We can interact with the spacecraft with electromagnetic fields as well. So instead of shooting particles or instead of contact with the surface of the moon, we can somehow build a system on the moon with perhaps high enough towers that generate that kind of electromagnetic field that would slow your spacecraft down. That way, you can also spare the fuel from braking or landing, actually.
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think that's a very realistic idea. I don't know how fast you could slow down a spacecraft, but on Earth there is already a couple of companies creating plasma brakes. So with some electric current, they have long strips of very thin metal, and with electric current, they can start to slow down the spacecraft. For example, one Finnish company, Aurora Propulsion, does that, which I actually interviewed with Felix from What About It. And they did also have some ideas on magnetic brakes, electromagnetic brakes, for example, on around Jupiter, Saturn. So yeah, I would say that could be the most realistic idea we have come up today with.
Yeah, and we didn't even mention. Well, it's not gonna be very realistic. It's gonna be totally dangerous and risky. But in theory, if you are flying over the moon in a with a horizontal speed parallel to the surface, and you have a big enough tube standing on really high legs, and you can control and aim very well with your spacecraft to fly into that tube, and your spacecraft has radial legs, long lines of what kind of small tubes or material, whatever, and then it can interact with the material of the tube itself, and with the friction it can slow down the spacecraft. Of course, as we talked about magnetic fields, it is more practical that this tube generates a magnetic field which actually slows down the spacecraft, quite similar way as a magnetic levitation rail on the Earth with is accelerating or braking with the help of a linear motor built into the railway. Yeah. So that was one more one more tiny bit about this clever landing, but I just made some calculations today about the Lunar Starship, which is now a very hot topic because it is chosen to be the human landing system for the Artemis program, which is a great thing. But we know that just the thing that we are talking about, how hard it is to land on the moon and return from the moon, and especially with such a huge spaceship as the Lunar Starship, which is almost 20-story high, as high as a 20-story high building about. And I made the calculations how many residual fuel the Lunar Starship is gonna have after leaving Earth's orbit, going to moon, go into lunar orbit, and then land on the moon. And it turned out that the SpaceX engineers have some work with that, because with if we are calculating with the standard Starship mass, it is not gonna be enough. It's gonna be enough to go to lunar orbit, but certainly not enough to also come back to the Earth. Yeah.
Well, that sounds like a problem for SpaceX.
But there are quite big margins in the Lunar Starship, because you have so we are talking about 100 tons of cargo mass, and from that 100 tons, if it's not 100, if it's only 50, then it's not a big, not so big problem that it would be if it's like not 2 tons but only 1. So you see.
Yeah, I think it's more likely 5 to 10 tons than 100 tons for the first missions.
Yeah, and it's not really needed to have 100 tons, because in the first mission, the first Artemis mission going to the moon will be the crew of 4, right? And from that 4, it is only 2 who is intended to land on the moon, as I know. Do you know about that?
Yeah, I have a similar idea. So yeah, I think it's like that.
Yeah. So if we are talking about two people, they are not gonna move easily that 100-ton theoretical cargo. I think so.
Yeah. No.
So that's probably for later missions.
Yeah,
Okay.
and probably those would be more like cargo ships where they just land and stay on the moon. And the Lunar Starship doesn't have a heat shield, so it will never come back to Earth anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, hopefully never, because yeah, as you mentioned, without the heat shield, it would but not be very healthy for that starship.
Yeah, no.
Okay, and as we are talking about how to land on the moon in a clever way, and about the Lunar Starship, and the difficulties to also to land and also to launch from there. There is one interesting idea or concept which is already there for quite a long time on Earth, which is called a space elevator. If perhaps you so on the Earth, the space elevator concept is based on as Earth is rotating 24 hours for one rotation, as we all know. That has a quite large velocity on the equator.
Yeah.
Yeah, 1,600 kilometers per hour, something like that, which is surprisingly big. And
Yeah,
if
I think
you,
it's even more. If it's the orbital speed, it would be around 7.5 kilometers per second on Earth.
yeah, but I thought of only the Earth, the equator surface points speed, the rotational
Yeah,
speed.
yeah.
So that is also over the sound, speed of sound. But of course, because the atmosphere is moving together with the surface, it's it's not the case, fortunately. So so the space elevator concept is we just have a so long cable that is spreading to the over the geostationary orbit
Yeah.
radius, and that way.
I think it's almost to the, was it L1 or L2 point? Do you remember?
Yeah, I don't know, but I think it depends on how much weight do you put to that part, because it is the force that is going to be generated. It is similar as you are spinning, for example, a chain, or
Yeah.
or rather a rope. It's not so dangerous. So if you spin a rope, that spinning movement generates a force on the rope that keeps it straight. And the very similar concept as Earth is rotating, and if you have a long enough rope and with a weight, a counterweight on the end, it will be kept straight in line, and also it will be possible to climb on that cable with an elevator, of course, because you don't want to climb freehand, because the atmosphere is getting thinner, and then it disappears, so it's not so good. Anyone can tell you that, whoever climbed the Himalaya mountain, the Mount Everest or Chomolungma. So this is the concept of the space elevator. If you have that long enough cable and it is somewhere fixed on the on the equator somewhere, or close to the equator. Actually, it has to be the equator. I think is the best. And then you only have to have some energy for the elevator to climb all the way to space, and there you can enter a spacecraft which is there, orbiting spacecraft, and then you are in space without the need of a launch of a rocket. So that's the concept. And on the moon, it is not so possible, because the moon is rotating so slowly. It only turn around in 28 days, so its surface tangential speed is really low. And the idea, if you still want to make a space elevator on the moon, can still be implemented in a way, in building a megastructure, a railway, a magnetic railway, all along the equator of the moon. And on that railway, you can move a train which grips to the railway, so which can withstand a force, an upward force, without elevating. And to that train, you can fix a cable which can be the space elevator cable. And because that train could travel with a really high speed all around the moon, around and around, that cable with the counterweight can act as a space elevator. And so you can have a space elevator on the moon. And of course, going to that, it needs a parallel railway. And on that parallel railway, the people and the cargo gets on the train. They are adjusting speed with the always rotating other train. They can transfer and they can use the elevator, or just the opposite way, coming to the moon without the need of using fuels. Yeah, so about something like that, but that needs a lot of energy, a lot of materials, perhaps some self-reproducing automats which are building the railway. And
Yeah,
so that's a funny idea.
Yeah, sounds pretty complicated. And
Yeah.
I think we don't even have materials that could support a space elevator on Earth, but maybe on the moon, but it's not very viable for the near future.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. Yeah. Actually, the problem is that to make that, the gravity is low, so it can be done. As we know that there are plans for building a space elevator on Mars, which also has a lower gravity, only about 40% of the Earth's gravity is on Mars. So, but on the Mars, if we are talking about this, on the Mars, we have two problems actually, which are the moons, actually, the Mars moons, Deimos and Phobos. We can hear these names now, because SpaceX is building those launch platforms with these names, actually. But yeah. So these moons, especially one of those, I don't recall which one. Do you perhaps recall that which is the one which has a lower orbital altitude?
Let me check real quick. Phobos is under 6,000 kilometers from Mars.
Yeah. So Phobos is, and also the orbit of Phobos is also just around the equator, so just above the equator of Mars, something like that. And because of that, the Mars space elevator cable could be in danger hitting the moon, which could be, of course, catastrophic. So there is a little engineering problem on Mars, but unfortunately we are not yet there that it is a practical problem for us.
Yeah, and I think at today's prices or even near future prices, just using a Starship would be cheaper.
Yeah.
The building costs would be huge.
Absolutely. The Starship is a surprisingly cheap thing, and they are trying to make it even cheaper. Actually, I think that's one of the goal with making the next and the next and the next prototype. Not only to experiment with those prototypes, but also the method and the way they are building it. It is also evolving with every build sample.
Yeah, will be very interesting to see how it goes. But I think that's all the time we have today. And thanks everyone for listening. I've been Mikko, the host of Deep Dive Fridays, and with me has been
Szabolcs from What About It.
Thanks. And remember to like, share, and subscribe. And if you are interested in what we do, you can check out our Patreon page at patreon.com to join these amazing people: Adrian Moisa, the Angry Astronaut, Howard Walker, Stinger NSW, What About It, Chisuanet Sebastian, Susie R., Framrick, Gio Pagliari, Marco Makuc, Anthony Mann, Warhawk. Thank you very much for supporting us. It means a lot to us. Bye-bye.